It all started on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I noticed something odd sticking out of my mailbox, a letter with a shiny HOA logo emblazoned on the front. I live in a small town in the Midwest where people generally mind their own business, so anything that looks even remotely official immediately raises red flags. I'm Eric Dawson, by the way. I've owned my property for over 20 years, and in all that time, I've never once had a deal with a homeowners association. My land sits on the edge of town, away from the tightly packed cookie-cutter neighborhoods and their perfectly manicured lawns. I bought this place for its freedom. No rules, no meddling neighbors, just my land and my terms. So you can imagine my confusion when I found that letter. Curious but cautious, I tore it open and read. Asterisk, dear homeowner. As part of the Oakwood Community HOA, your property is subject to community standards and regulations. The following violations have been noted and must be addressed within 30 days to avoid fines and further action. Unapproved fencing materials. Failure to maintain HOA-approved landscaping. Unauthorized vehicle parking in the driveway asterisk. Sincerely, Brenda Whitaker, President, Oakwood Community HOA. I laughed out loud, a deep belly laugh that echoed off the porch. I didn't belong to an HOA. Never signed anything. Never agreed to anyone's so-called community standards. So, naturally, I crumpled the letter and tossed it straight into the trash. Problem solved, right? Wrong. 2 days later, I was out in my yard when I noticed 3 people standing awkwardly at the edge of my driveway. Clipboards in hand, business casual attire. They had that unmistakable air of bureaucratic self-importance. I set my coffee down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and stepped outside. Morning, I called, leaning casually against the porch railing. The woman in front, mid-40s with sharp features and a blonde bob cut, cleared her throat. Good morning, sir. I'm Brenda Whitaker, president of the Oakwood HOA. We're here to conduct a quick property evaluation. For what? I asked, eyebrows raised. Brenda's smile didn't reach her eyes. Since your property now falls within Oakwood community boundaries, we need to ensure it aligns with community regulations. I nearly spat out my coffee. Since when? We voted last month to expand the HOA district to include adjacent properties, she said, as if that explained everything. I let that sink in for a second. You voted? I didn't vote. No one asked me. Brenda's smile tightened. The board decided it was in the community's best interest. I chuckled. Well, Brenda, this ain't a monarchy. My land isn't part of your HOA. Never was, never will be. One of her clipboard-carrying lackeys, a skinny guy who looked like he hadn't seen manual labor a day in his life, cleared his throat. Technically, the HOA has jurisdiction over properties within the expanded boundary. Technically, I cut him off. You're all trespassing on private land. Brenda's face twitched, but she held on to that plastic smile. Mr. Dawson, we're simply trying to maintain community standards. If you refuse to cooperate, the HOA will pursue legal action. I sipped my coffee, savoring the moment. Good. I'd love to see how that works out for you. They left in a huff, whispering among themselves, but I could feel it. This wasn't over. The escalation. The next morning, HOA violation notices were plastered on my fence. A week later, they started arriving by mail, dozens of them. One claimed my porch wasn't aesthetically compliant. Another complained about the color of my mailbox. They even had the audacity to say my truck was an unauthorized vehicle. It was almost funny until I checked my security cameras. Around 2 a.m., my motion sensors caught 3 figures sneaking around my yard. Flashlights danced through the trees as they marked out parts of my land, jotting notes on clipboards. They weren't giving up. In fact, they were planning something. So I upgraded my security, motion-activated floodlights, high-res cameras with night vision, the whole 9 yards. 3 nights later, the alarms went off again. But this time, they didn't just sneak around. They came to my door. The fake cops. It was 6:30 in the morning when 2 men showed up in black tactical vests, badges clipped to their belts. One was built like a linebacker with mirrored sunglasses, the other, thinner, nervously fidgeting with a notepad. Stamped across their vests were the words, HOA security enforcement. Eric Dawson, the big guy, barked. I didn't answer. Just sipped my coffee. You're in violation of multiple HOA regulations, he continued, and we've been authorized to detain you for a compliance hearing. I almost spit out my coffee again, almost. Detain me? I asked, eyebrow raised. The wiry guy nodded, his voice cracking. Yes, sir. We'll have to escalate to law enforcement if you refuse. Which department you boys with? They hesitated. We're contracted under the HOA, the big guy finally said. So, not real cops, I clarified. They didn't respond. All right, I said, pulling out my phone. Let's call someone who is. They stiffened as I dialed the local sheriff. The call was on speaker. Sheriff's Department. What's your emergency? Yeah, I've got 2 guys on my property impersonating law enforcement, I said, loud enough for the 2 men to hear. They're threatening to detain me. That was all it took. The big guy's bravado vanished. This is all a misunderstanding, he stammered. Not anymore, I grinned. 15 minutes later, a real sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Deputy Harris, an older guy with a deep tan and no patience for nonsense, stepped out. All right, he sighed, eyeing the 2 fake officers. What the hell's going on here? They're impersonating cops, I explained, and trespassing. Harris's jaw clenched. You 2 know impersonating law enforcement's a crime, right? They were cuffed within minutes. Brenda Whitaker pulled up just in time to see her hired muscle stuffed into the back of the cruiser. She stormed up to Deputy Harris. This is outrageous, she shrieked. They were following HOA protocol. Harris didn't flinch. Ma'am, HOA protocol doesn't override state law. You're lucky I'm not cuffing you right now. The court battle. But Brenda wasn't done. A week later, I got a court summons. The HOA was suing me, claiming I was a public nuisance and demanding that my property be forcibly annexed into their jurisdiction. That was her big move. I called my lawyer, a pit bull named Alan Gibbons, who thrived on cases like this. She's overplayed her hand. Alan smirked after reading the complaint. This is going to be fun. Court was a spectacle. Brenda sat smug at the plaintiff's table, flanked by a high-priced attorney. But the judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Evans, wasn't having it. Mr. Dawson, she asked after the HOA made their opening statements, does your property fall under HOA jurisdiction? No, Your Honor. I slid over my deed, zoning maps, and video evidence. The judge didn't even blink. The HOA has no legal authority over Mr. Dawson's property. This lawsuit is frivolous. Then I hit them with my counterclaim, harassment, trespassing, emotional distress. By the time the judge banged her gavel, the HOA owed me $50,000 in damages, plus legal fees. Brenda's face was priceless, a mix of rage and utter defeat. The aftermath. But I wasn't done. With my settlement money, I bought ad space for a billboard right at the entrance of Oakwood Community. Bold letters read, "This land is not yours. Stay off it. Eric Dawson." It stood there for months, a towering reminder of their failure. Brenda resigned in disgrace. The HOA board fell apart. The community soured on their once power-hungry leaders. And me? I spent my mornings sipping coffee on my porch, watching the sunrise over land that was and always would be mine. My land. My rules.